So I was at IIM Ahmedabad during the years 1979 to 81, and it's been 36 years since we passed out of this, world-class esteemed institution, which has taught me a great deal, and the journey of my professional life thereafter, and the achievements and successes that one has had. In many ways, I give a lot of credit to my years at IIM Ahmedabad and what I learned, both in terms of the curriculum, but also in terms of the brilliant environment which made many of us very aspirational, strive for excellence, and also in terms of the very high caliber, talented, and extremely accomplished, if I may say, peer group that was at IIM Ahmedabad, which really sort of made you trigger, some of your, if I may say, best attributes, and makes you want to really do well in life. We also made a lot of friends. There are so many memories associated with this place, and every time we meet, we reminisce about those great times that we spent here. So I'll briefly talk about my life journey as it has evolved. I grew up in Delhi in my formative years. I came to IIM as a very young 19-year-old person, straight out of I did my BCom honours from Sriram College of Delhi, and we were a very small group of, if I may say, students at that time, who came literally fresh out of college, with very little exposure to the world, no work experience. And then we were, confronted with all these smart engineers from the various IITs and other places in the country. Many others who were top of their field in sports, in other extracurricular thing, and had really had the experience and the exposure of winning, of leading, and so on and so forth. So we initially felt that we were perhaps at a relative disadvantage, and we were sort of coming from a handicap, yeah. And but that was not to be. This place has so much to offer, IIM Ahmedabad, and that we all learnt and grew here in many ways, and that is the best part of being here. It's the first time we got exposed to the rigor, that this place has to offer, particularly in the first year, yeah. And it starts from the first day, literally. And that rigor, some of us were not used to in the past. And that rigor, which was through, classroom, assignments, class participation, and, a very interesting subject we had called WAC, Written Analysis and Communication, where we used to actually get assignments just prior to the weekend, and the submission had to be on the weekend, and literally we had to work through the night. And it taught us a lot about perseverance, meeting deadlines, and yet getting the job done. So there was a lot of learning. I'm just giving one example. And well, 2 years at IIM, and then I started my career with Bank of America. So I had two of the leading, if I may say, job offers on campus. At that time, Tata Administrative Services and Bank of America, and we were allowed to have two offers. So those were my two. But interestingly, at the same time, I got a fellowship, or a Rotary fellowship, to go to the US and, in a way, be chosen as India's Student Ambassador of Goodwill. And also accompanied with that. So while that had certain ambassadorial requirements in terms of speaking to the diaspora in the United States about India's cultures, values and views, it also allowed us to, register for an educational program and in some ways enhance one's, exposure and understanding in terms of an academic institution out there. So I decided to do an MS in International Finance at Michigan Ann Arbor, and very interestingly, Mr. C.K. Prahlad was a senior personality, and dean of the faculty at that time. So I had the good fortune of actually learning and, training under him also and studying under him. I took up my campus offer with Bank of America thereafter. I began my career in the US and then slowly transitioned back to India in the early years itself. In Bank of America, I was there for 28 years. Long journey. And it was very exciting. I had the opportunity to literally work in different parts of the country. I had assignments in South, East, North, and eventually in Mumbai. And I also had some international exposure, starting with the US and then later on in Hong Kong. And was fortunate enough at a young age of under 41 to become the CEO for the India and South Asia franchise of Bank of America. That was very interesting, and we were able to achieve a lot with that franchise. Bank of America was at that time the leading foreign bank in India and the most profitable and most efficient foreign bank in India during my time. After 8.5 long years as CEO, I had the urge to look at something different. I think all that we had aspired for coming out of IIM, and honestly, I'm telling you, between my peer group, we were very driven. Let me say that, not just me. I mean, my peer group, my batchmates, many of them are doing so well in life. They are leading global corporations, some of them right now. Some of them are top people in the government, and some of them are in the policy framework, some of them are in the world of education, again, in top positions, and so on and so forth. So there was a lot of inspiration that one got from each other. And in a very healthy manner, we all looked at each other and we wanted to continue to excel. But that fervor was strong. I think the desire for achievement was well embedded in terms of our professional upbringing and the exposure we've had. But then there was a strong urge to do something very different, more challenging, something that would impact people and lives and make a difference in the social, if I may say, ecosystem also at the same time. One had this urge to be a large system change agent, if I may put it that way, and move away from the confines of business corporation and sort of make a difference there. And literally, so in a way, moving away from achieving for yourself to achieving for if I may say, the people at large. And looking at my brand equity, my skills, my exposure, my experience, I felt that it had to be India-centric, because essentially my strengths, my network of relationships and my brand equity was within the, if I may say, skeletons of the Indian environment and society. And banking is what I knew best, so I thought that India was ripe. India had built some great institutions in the banking field in the previous few years, but we felt that for the size of India's economy and for the kind of banking potential that was still there, untapped, and much more that could be done in the space of furthering banking proliferation, taking it to the hinterland of India, creating more financial inclusion in the country, which would drive economic growth, and using that as a model for building an institution. That was something that was uppermost in my mind, because that way I could tick all the boxes in terms of my personal and professional objectives at that time. So therein lied the genesis of what was Ratnakar Bank then, and now we have rebranded and call it RBL Bank. Ratnakar Bank at that time in 2010-11, which is the time I entered, I left Bank of America, and this urge to also do something which would be a very strong, durable second innings of life. At the same, which therefore the thought of building an institution, building a cadre of talented, competent, driven, committed team members, and at the same time building a business model which would be far-reaching in terms of its impact. That was the key driving force at that time, and that way we would achieve both our professional, economic, and social objectives. So that's what drove us. I reached out to like-minded people. It so happens coincidentally that most of them were also alumni from IIMA Alumni, younger than me, of course, and that was important. But at the same time, I found that this urge to step out and do something was very strong in many other people I reached out to. So putting together, if I may say, a best-in-class management team, which would otherwise have been a very difficult task, was not so difficult. And again, my if I may say, my association with IIMA Alumni and being a member of this great family was of great value in terms of being able to put together that team, which we are still together 7 years out, and we are like family. And we are powering this institution, further and further in its journey. So that's one aspect. And so at that time, we took this very small, very regional, locally, if I may say, relevant bank, which was in southern Maharashtra only, dealing with local small business and trading community. But it was a full-fledged, if I may say, it had a full-fledged banking license. So we said that this is an institution which is sort of struggling. It was underinvested in terms of its, infrastructure, technology, platforms, etc. It was undermanaged and it was underperforming. And Reserve Bank of India, our regulator, was very concerned about its future survival. And it felt either they felt that they should shut it down or merge it with some other bank, or it needed a full infusion of professional management, capital, etc. And we felt that we were good for the challenge. And we stepped in with the support of the Reserve Bank of India, and they were very keen that to back a team which could professionalize the institution. So we took it up from its very humble, if I may say, and modest background at that time, and we decided to actually bring new vigor, energy, and build a, if I may say, a high-class, professionally management, vibrant, new age institution. And that's been an interesting journey for us over the last 7 years. It was a bank which was, like I said, very rooted in terms of its regional environment. It had a 100% unionized workforce. It was, antiquated in terms of its technology platform. And there were, therefore, significant transition challenges. And those transition challenges had to be dealt with first on a cultural dimension, as far as the people are concerned, in terms of addressing a very traditional, narrow mindset and changing it into a mindset that, where we can all together, in a very inclusive manner, build a very relevant and a high quality institution. So that was one aspect, which was where there was a lot of learning, because this is something that is not taught in management schools. And much of that is intuitive, much of that is where your best people skills, come out. And fortunately, our very purposeful, honest, sincere, people-oriented approach helped us in winning over the people at that time that existed in the bank and making them an integral part of our future journey. At the same time, we brought in significant talent, from outside. And we were able to create literally a cadre of banking professionals which had all the relevant skills and capabilities to build a high-class institution. We created a very strong governance architecture. We revamped the entire board of the bank and brought in, some of the finest thinkers and best minds and professionals, on our board. And also at the same time, brought in a large dose of capital by bringing in, again, pedigreed institutional investors who would invest in the bank for the long term. And we call it long-term patient capital, from some of the best names in the world, which included HDFC Limited, IFC Washington, Commonwealth Development Corporation of UK, California Pension, and few others, to give that necessary, if I may say, strong, capital foundation to the bank, which will allow us to then execute on the build-out strategy of the institution. I'm very happy to report that this has been perhaps the best 7 years of my life, and that also for many of my colleagues who have been, in step with me in this journey. And today, where we stand, we have taken this institution, we have grown it more than 25 times in this 6.5 year period, We listed last year, and we had a highly successful listing. It was oversubscribed 70 times, and even in the time that has elapsed since the listing, the bank has been performing extremely well, and market recognition has also been exceedingly positive. And even in terms of operating performance, we are able to achieve the best financial benchmarks, of the best run institutions in the country. Just to give a dimension of, our journey in terms of, if I may say, value creation. 7 years ago, this bank was languishing at a total enterprise value of just around 500 crores. And today, we are a listed bank with a market cap of approximately 20,000 crores, which is in excess of $3 billion. We have, over the last 5 successive years, been the fastest growing bank in the country. And also, I think, in terms of the value creation and the financial returns that have been, given by this bank, they perhaps compare with the best, that this country has had to offer over the last several years. So it's indeed, therefore, been a very gratifying journey from various aspects. The part that I feel most, if I may say, excited about, and the most, which gives me the greatest personal satisfaction, is the fact that this is an employee-owned, managed institution. While we have large professional, as I said earlier, pedigreed institutions which are largely invested in the bank, and that proportion is more than 50% in terms of the overall ownership, and there's another 30-odd% that is owned by the public at large. Almost 15% plus is owned by the larger mass of employees in the bank. Almost every employee of the institution is a shareholder. And that was one of the fundamental building blocks of our architecture, that this will be a professionally owned, managed and governed institution. And in that sense, the well-being that we will create should be distributed to all. So when I started talking about inclusion, we therefore follow the principles of inclusion in every respect. Yeah, the employees are very much part of the journey of this institution. They have a very high sense of ownership and belonging, and therefore I think they bring the best to the table. We also, in terms of our business model, as I said earlier, we reach out to the masses. We feel there is a large treasure at the lower end of the pyramid, and we are trying to bank that, both in terms of services, technology, and in terms of social relevance. So that is the profile of the institution that we have today, and I'm very pleased with the way it's going. I think as an entrepreneurial journey, this is one of the interesting examples, even when you relate it to the various success stories of alumni of IIM Ahmedabad. I think in many ways this is unique in terms of an entrepreneurial journey, especially when started not as a startup, in the initial years, but as a second means of life. I'll sort of pause there as far as this aspect is concerned, and let me go back to, why I'm, here today. I mean, all this, not just me, there are many of my colleagues who are alumni of this institution. And we all felt that we have got so much out of here that in some ways we have to give back. And we decided, therefore, to make a small donation, to this institution, and in that sense reconnect and make and give back to our alma mater. So that is one aspect. When I arrived on this campus, as did many of us, just the whole, if I may say, environment, starting from the architecture, the layout, and everything is inspiring. The world-class faculty that we came across, their ultimate commitment to the cause of learning and excellence, and bringing out the best in all of us, was again something that we have carried throughout our lives. And then, of course, the kind of peer group that I mentioned earlier, that one came across and learned so much from each other. We had some of the most toughest battles and struggles here, initially struggling with the rigor of that this institution sort of brings out, but eventually when you get used to it, that's when you start growing and developing. And when it comes to the academic program itself, I think for some of us who were raw and young at that time, just the kind of way of sort of thinking holistically, thinking strategically, at the same time being able to break down issues, problems into its various sort of parts and components, and then trying to sort of piece them together into possible solutions. That very approach was absolutely interesting and new for some of us, and I think that has been very useful to me and many others in our subsequent professional journeys in life. So every time we look at a situation now, firstly, we don't get overawed by it. No challenge is too difficult, having been through the kind of, life we've had at IIMA Alumni. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is that we believe that, we will succeed. That attitude is that every problem can be solved and there is a solution for every problem. It's just that who will get it first and how will we reach it. So that the second part is the attitude. And then to connect the macro and the micro and how to then navigate is some of the other sort of learnings that I have had and I have applied in my professional life over time. So I have a lot to owe to this place, and I think in many ways this institution is still the leading management institution in the country and one of the finest in the world. And any day I would encourage, anybody whom I can guide and advise to choose this if they are selected over any of the best institutions in the world. So I want to stop there and thank you for giving me this opportunity.